Find it incredible that the Biden administration doesn't seem to believe that this country, that we have checks and balances and a judicial system here, and they feel like, employers should just not follow the rule and the law.
Well, the Biden administration should be following the example set by Governor DeSantis in Florida. He's just signed legislation in the great town of Brandon, Florida, that protects our workers against these vaccine mandates from the private sector. I've got breaking news I want to share with you about these vaccine mandates and our military. I know we care deeply about our military and our nation's readiness, and I just got word that there have been 2,200 requests for religious exemptions in the United States Navy, 1,549 in the United States Marine Corps. How many out of those do you think have been granted, Steph? Zero. Not a single one. Why even have a religious exemption on the books if they're going to be denied en masse regardless of the circumstance or the sincerity of someone's faith? So I am deeply concerned about all Americans who have to suffer from these vaccine mandates. And you know what? If we had a real appreciation for natural immunity as a consequence of having contracted the virus, then we wouldn't have to endure this. But no one can make money off of natural immunity. And you've got Dr. Fauci carrying the water of big pharma, not for the benefit of the American people.
Yeah, and then the latest from Dr. Fauci has a lot of people scratching their heads here. They're saying, what, the vaccinated are filling up the hospitals now? I thought vaccines work. And then now he's encouraging people to make sure they go and get their boosters. And again, I'm not doubting the vaccine, but the idea that they continue to push this on to people, not give them a choice, and then yet still the vaccinated can spread and contract COVID-19. So again, it's a little mind-boggling.
Well, still the best vaccine we've found is Mother Nature's vaccine. It's contracting the virus. That is what has provided the greatest protection, the most durable protection over the longest period of time. And it's not anti-vaccine to say that a national strategy to combat coronavirus should have at its centerpiece the recognition of natural immunity and the ability to have people who are naturally immune doing critical things that we need for the economy to work. But instead, we've become addicted to lockdowns and the economic policy that germinates from lockdowns. And that is what we just saw from the United States Congress, this mass move to socialism, Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi getting the momentum they needed from those original 13 Republican turncoats who voted for the infrastructure spending plan. And now Americans woke up today with $4 trillion in additional spending that will crush the dollar, make gas prices rise, complicate the supply chain, and make every frustration that we've experienced over these last 10 months even worse.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll get to the Build Back Better moving forward to the Senate in just a second. But I wanted to bring this up too. And I kind of predicted this was going to happen. But I wasn't 100% sure that they were going to go there. Dr. Fauci is now expecting for babies and toddlers to have a COVID-19 vaccine by spring of 2022. And keep in mind, parents are already concerned, according to polling, about the vaccines for 5 to 11-year-olds. And then in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis made it clear that he was definitely not going to force young kids to get the vaccine. But yeah, I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Vaccines for babies now?
There's no evidence that suggests that babies and toddlers are uniquely vulnerable to coronavirus. Now, obviously, there are circumstances where people need to work with their doctor and make their own health decision. But here what we see from Dr. Fauci is more of this one-size-fits-all medicine. And I think it's going to build resentment and resistance to the vaccine. It's not going to encourage more utilization.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that they need to talk to their doctors about, families. They need to consider the pros with the cons when vaccinating potentially babies and toddlers now. But yeah, it's interesting. But again, I think Governor Ron DeSantis is leading by example in Florida by making sure that he's not going to put parents in a bad situation, deciding whether or not they should send their kids to school or force their kids to get the jab.
Totally correct. I agree. I think Florida's paving the way, and I think that other states could actually replicate the effort Florida is undertaking to combat the federal government. We are suing the federal government and some of these employment standards that they're trying to put on our people. And if we had a critical mass of states responding in like, then I think the Biden regime efforts to try to bring us all into the gravity of these poor choices would be less successful.
Yeah. Now I want to shift gears here and get back to Build Back Better. As I mentioned, it's moving to the Senate now. We've been told by the Democrats, by Team Biden, that it's going to cost $0. Obviously, that's not true. They are casting doubt on the CBO's projections on Build Back Better. They don't want to. They're saying that now necessarily we shouldn't listen to how much it could potentially cost. This is American taxpayer dollars that we're discussing here, and it's a lot of money, and they continue to push these trillion-dollar bills as if it's nothing, and then they try to trick us into thinking that it's going to help with inflation somehow. Like, printing money does not help inflation.
Right. I often say if printing money made your nation more powerful, then Zimbabwe would be the strongest country in the world. But that is not the monetary policy that actually leads to success. Here, what we see is just a total jailbreak on monetary policy and on the printing of dollars in a way that will increase all of these inflation challenges that are crushing American families right now. But look, we shouldn't just blame Biden and the Democrats, Stephanie. We would never have taken that vote on that spending bill today if we had defeated Nancy Pelosi when she couldn't get Democrats to get their spending legislation off the ground weeks ago. But 13 Republicans told us that they were building leverage against the reconciliation bill by voting for the infrastructure funding. And the reality was they didn't build any leverage. They built momentum. You know, folks thought, like JohnKatko in New York, thought they were going to be paving additional roads in their districts. The reality is they just paved the way for Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden to be able to force socialism on the rest of us. It was a deeply, deeply tragic strategic choice that Republicans didn't band together. We could have made Joe Biden a lame duck already, but instead now they've got the wind at their back, and God help us, we're relying on Joe Manchin to be able to inject some sanity into this process. And he made very sound arguments about the fact that we've got so much money that we've already appropriated that hasn't even been spent in the U.S. economy. And so to overlay that with all this additional spending, very unwise. It will lead to waste, inefficiency, and it will devalue the work that we need to actually get our economy going again.
Yeah. Now, I have a clip from the House floor where Kevin McCarthy went on for a few hours. Roll tape.
So I ask you, is it right to raise taxes on small businesses whose only crime is making their product in America? Is it right to ignore the dire, desperate pleas of our border agents and pass a colossal amnesty for illegal immigrants during the middle of the largest wave of illegal immigration in human history? Is it right to cast a vote that will bring more drugs, more crime, more job losses into your communities? Is it right to destroy safety to accommodate open borders?
So the House Minority Leader spoke for about 8 hours and 32 minutes, I believe, in opposition to this socialist bill. He made a lot of great points.
Yeah, I guess what Kevin McCarthy lacks in strategy, he makes up for in oratory. It rings a little hollow for me. He took over 8 hours to bloviate about the maladies in the Democrat legislation, but he wouldn't take 8 seconds to remove JohnKatko as the Republican lead on the Homeland Security Committee after JohnKatko stabbed us in the back on impeachment, cut a deal with Democrats on the January 6th Commission, and then was the first Republican voting for the legislation that ultimately led to this moment in time we're in now, where Americans are really on the brink. If Joe Manchin doesn't stop this in the Senate, Joe Biden will have done more than FDR in terms of massive social spending, and that is not something that is going to help our economy. We see a war on work in America, a war on our small businesses. And so maybe I could have stood for a shorter speech, but a more focused approach to unifying the Republican caucus against something that is so dangerous to our constituents, to the country, to the economy, and to our nation's values.
Some great points there. And I will say, all eyes are on Manchin right now, and wondering if this is actually going to make it through the Senate. What's your prediction?
I believe winners win in Washington. I think if we'd have stopped them dead in their tracks on the first infrastructure funding bill, they would be nowhere right now. But they got a win on infrastructure funding. They got a win in the House of Representatives today. And so I think certainly momentum is with the Democrats, not with those of us who are trying to implore to the common sensibilities of Joe Manchin. I wish it were otherwise, Stephanie. And what's so tragic is we had the ability. We were holding the cards, but we gave the game away. And now our fellow Americans will suffer as a consequence.
All great points, Congressman. Thank you so much for joining me.